Hello. Hey. Mm, okay. You can hear it? Fuck. I'm gonna boil alive. What's up? What's up? Can you see it? Can you see stuff? Tell me if you can see it and hear me. Okay, hold on. Mm, Better now? Is it better now? Check. What shouldn't be audible? Oh. Yeah. All right, those who are watching the live stream, can you hear me? Like, put a thumbs up again, I guess. Okay. So guys, just like a final thumbs up, just ensuring that you guys can hear and see what's happening on screen. We'll begin shortly after that. Immediately, actually. All right, cool. So, yeah, so welcome to the second session, I guess, for Unity. This will be the one following the one that Rastogi taught you guys the previous week, and he basically dealt with most of the interface stuff, right? The basics. So I'm assuming you guys have watched that already, and based on that, I'm basically going to be building upon it and explaining the parts regarding the movement of characters and the importing of assets and stuff. Yeah. So now, one of the main things is that in Unity, there are two ways that you can have a character move. There's going to be one that is based upon physics, yeah, and the other one is, well, non-physics based. So just as an example, I'll show you this. So first, you just set this up, yeah. So just creating a plane and a cube. For now, the cube's going to serve as my player object, and that serves as a surface. Yeah. So on this cube, first things first, we end up saying create and C# script, okay? Because anything that has to be coded, any sort of behavior for any object has to be coded into a C# script in Unity. So we create a C# script, we name it, let's say, player player movement. Yeah. Double click that, and the environment that it opens in depends upon what you've installed. You guys might end up seeing Visual Studio. I have Visual Studio Code, which is like a lightweight version of it, so that doesn't really matter. The code's what's important. All right, so here we have the basic template that follows. Okay, so the class name is already given here. That's based on the name that you've given it over here itself within Unity. So that is copied. You have two functions here by default. It's start and update. Start is what is called at the very initialization of that script itself or that object. The moment that object comes into existence, this code is run, the one inside start. There's another function called awake which runs before start, and update is a function that is run at every single frame of the game. So as you guys know, each game runs at a certain frame rate, right? It's suggested that you run games at 60 FPS. So update is the function that runs at every single frame of that game. So yeah, as we were saying, the movement, right? So the first things first is you need to create, okay, for movement you need direction, right? So the direction component requires vectors. Vector, basically, for vectors you have public vector 3 and move direction, let's say. Yeah. All right. So in this, the public refers to the fact that this can be accessed by other scripts and is open, right? So this is quite similar to other coding languages as well. But the other thing is here, public also refers to the fact that once you go inside Unity, you can, okay, yeah, another thing, just one second, it's compiling. Yeah, cool. So cube, we end up dumping, okay, you can drag this and either dump it onto the cube itself directly here, or you can just drag it and dump it here. Either ways it gets selected. So since I kept that as public over here, it also shows up in the inspector. So there is another way of keeping it private and showing up in the inspector, but this is commonly used, at least. The whole purpose of public most of the time is to be accessible to other scripts. that you may want to connect to or get variables or information out of. So yeah, so we have the vector 3 move direction, right? Yeah, okay. So vector 3 is the type, like you have integers, floats, characters, etc. So you have vector 3. So this will have, you can kind of consider it to be an array of XYZ, basically, the axes, and this is going to be a name, obviously. So we have that, and after that what we'll have is we can have speed. Yeah, let's put speed. So we have public again because I want this to be editable through the inspector itself, and name it speed. Okay, so in start I don't really want to do anything, so I'm just going to leave that blank. Okay, and continuing in update, here's what we can do. Right, so first things first, we can do float edge equals input dot get access. Now what this does is get access horizontal, right? So get access, basically what it does is, for a joystick or for your, let's say, a keyboard, the horizontal component, this word horizontal itself, is a keyword which is predefined within Unity itself in its, at some point over here, I'm not particularly sure where, but it's predefined already, where horizontal stands for basically your A and D, or on a joystick obviously the horizontal movement, and it goes for all the way from -1 to +1, where A, at least on your keyboard, A is -1 and D is +1. So get access basically gets those values and it swings from -1 to +1. Float edge will get that value out in terms of, a float. So now continuing on that, if you get this, you can do the vertical also. Vertical. So this applies for W and S, right? So going with that. Now, okay, now what happens is you have two values, right? You have the horizontal value and you have the vertical value. Now to get the vector for that direction, what you have to do is you take move direction, which is what you predefined on top itself already. You take move direction and then you say is equal to new vector. This is how you initialize the vector, at least. Okay, it's supposed to be vector 3, then the vector name is equal to new vector, and then you have okay, so in this it's usually, as I said, x, y and z, right? So in Unity, as you may have seen, right, the y axis is pointing upwards. We don't want this cube to move upwards, right? So that's why the y-axis is not to be edited. So we just leave that as 0. X is your horizontal, so we end up replacing that with h. And for z, we can have b. And then we close that. So now we get the direction in which our object needs to move as we press WASD. Okay. So as of now, we have the direction, right? Now here comes the important part. This is transform dot translate move direction times speed, right? So as I was saying, there's two ways to move an object. One is the physics based one and one is the not so physics based one. Transform dot translate is the non-physics based one. This is the kind of stuff that you'd primarily see in let's say certain 2D games where, okay, there are some games where you don't have a lot of drag, right? You could just, the moment you tap on a player's movement, he just immediately starts moving, or the moment you stop pressing a button, he just stops. So drag or inertia or momentum isn't a factor that's considered, right? So in these cases, transform.translate is needed. So what this does is it directly edits the transform, which is the, yeah, this transform of the object itself, and thereby moves the, yeah, and thus moves the player itself. So now transform.translate requires a vector, and that vector that we're providing here is move direction, right? So you guys can hear me, right? Okay, cool. So the, yeah, so it requires a direction. So move direction is that direction that we're providing it with. Now we're multiplying it with speed because we, that move direction itself will only range from -1 to 1, right? So that could be too little in terms of movement speed. So we just have a multiplying factor over here called speed, which will allow us to control how fast it moves. Cool. Any doubts? You guys could just ask, and Rastogi will hopefully clear them out in the chat. Also, just tell me if I'm going too fast or something, yeah? Right. So, yeah, continuing. So, the compilation's done. So, yeah, since we ended up having both of those going public, yeah, see, we had the move direction and the speed being public, it shows up in the inspector. So, by default, I haven't really initialized any value to it, so it doesn't really matter. Speed here, let's just say I'll give it 5, okay? And move direction is not something you need to mess around with because that will update itself according to how we move. Just scale this up a little bit more, yeah. And just make the ground, yeah, cool. Yeah, just give me a second, I'll just reset this thing and make it look a little better. Yeah, this part isn't exactly essential, it just makes it a bit easier to look around. Alright, cool. So the cube has a script that controls the player movement, right? Oh, okay, another thing. So transform.translate. The fact that it says transform here, you could also just have this dot transform. What it does is it refers to the object on which the script exists, which is the cube itself. So yeah, that's the thing. You don't actually need this dot transform every single time, because if you don't put this, it automatically assumes it's controlling that object itself. But you can put this dot transform. So continuing with that, once we press this, let it, okay. Now as I press W is, oh shit, okay, yeah, see, it moves really, really fast. So I'll just make this like 2, I guess. Okay, that's still a little fast. Make it like 0.5. Yeah, that's more like it. Okay, so as you guys can see, okay, let's say as I press S, you can see that Z goes all the way to -1 because that's your negative in the vertical direction. And as I press W, Z goes to +1 and it goes in the vertical direction. As you can see at the axis itself, it's going in the positive direction, yeah. And for X, just a second, yeah, for X, as it goes in the negative direction, you'll see this going to -1. And as it goes in the positive of X direction, it goes to +1. So that's it. So what it does is it calculates the vector depending on how I'm pressing the combination of WASD, and then accordingly as I control it, the cube moves. So now the benefit here being, as soon as I stop S, it just stops. So there's not any drag or momentum that's being considered, right? Also, the physics doesn't really matter considering this object's floating in air. So the other aspect that you could have is known as rigid body physics. So yeah, this pretty much ends here, right? This is one aspect that you could have. The other one would be, let's call this physics movement. Just a second. Right. Player movement. Okay. So we'll just control copy paste this thing because most of it's pretty much the exact same. Doesn't really matter. Yeah. When you do this, just make sure you change the name accordingly, according to what's given on top. Otherwise, that gets really annoying really fast. Alright, so physics movement, that's fine. So again, here also you need a move direction and you need speed. And the same manner you need horizontal and vertical get axis, so you get the values and you get move direction. It's pretty much the exact same in these aspects. What's important here is you have to get the rigid body of the object. So what the rigid body does is basically, one second, okay, yeah, as of now I'll just turn this one off and I'll just apply the physics one over here because it cannot be found. Physics movement. Yeah, as I said, naming can be a bit of an issue when you copy paste. Right. So we're here now. Uh, where was I? Yeah. So we have this. We dump physics over here. Okay. So this is what's being dealt with. Right. So we add a box collider to the plane. So the purpose of a box collider is it, as you may already know, but I'll just give you a brief recap. The box collider primarily serves as a sort of a boundary for any object so that two objects interacting know that they can either pass through something or be limited by it and get stopped, right? So adding a box collider to my plane is not particularly smart, but it basically ensures that, yeah, as you can see, there's like a very faint green outline, which shows that there's a box collider there, and I can just increase the thickness so you can see it, yeah. Okay, you can see that. So there's a box collider over there. So that will ensure that that acts as a surface, as a boundary for me to rest upon, for the cube to rest upon. The cube already has one on it by default, as you can see. The moment you spawn it, it usually has one. So right. So after that, the other thing you have to do is you add a rigid body. The function of a rigid body is, again, as was already explained, it applies physics to that particular object. So just by doing so with a rigid body and a box collider, once I turn this on, it should, due to gravity, just go fall down. Boop. Yeah, there you go. So it does that. This will not work, right? Yeah, of course. So the rigid body does its thing. Collision detection, I prefer it continuous. Yeah, the rest of it is fine. So now the thing is, you have a rigid body component on the cube, right? So the best way to get, you have to get that component. Each of these is called a component. So to get that component out, what you do is you do get component. I spelled it wrong. Rigid body. I do not think that's right. Just a minute. Ah, yeah. So you need to give it a name like that. Yeah, listen, I'm just referring a few of my older scripts. My bad. All right. So what this does is get component. So this keyword get component basically ends up referring to, one moment. Yeah, it references any of these objects, right? So you could have get component box collider and it would refer to that thing so that you can get data out of its size, let's say, or material, for example. Yes, thank you, Rastogi. And so after that, now adding this name in front of it basically allows you to reference it eventually. That's just a thing. So now using this RGB, what we can do is, instead of transform.translate, what we do is, I just comment that out. We do RGB dot. Now there's several ways that you can do it here too. Add force is a personal favorite. So you do move direction times speed, right? So now the function of add force is basically it, common sense, it adds force. It adds force in the direction that is provided over here multiplied by the speed. But this itself is applied upon the RGB object, which references the rigid body, which again lies on your cube. That's pretty much it. The name RGB does not, yeah, okay, my bad. Right, so we need to refer to it in advance. Rigid body RGB, right? Yeah, there you go. Okay, so this wasn't very necessary, but so okay, by dragging and dropping this, it knows that it's the cube that I've dragged and dropped in, and since I've ended up putting the data type as a rigid body, it just picks up the rigid body component within that. So I do speed as 1, I guess, right? Okay. And that does not seem to be moving. Do not know why. Well, it's shaking. I believe that the force might be a bit less. Yeah, okay. Yeah, as you can see, that's very physicsy. It bounces and jumps around. Okay, this looks pretty cool. Yeah, okay, so this is what happens when you add physics. It bounces and tumbles and yeah. Okay, I should stop playing around. So, one of the ways you could stop that is by adding constraints, right? So the whole point is you need to avoid rotation here. So we end up locking all the rotations. So all it does is moves forward and backward as we need it to. Oh, my bad. Uh, yeah. So now it just moves as needed. But again, as I told you, even though I let go of the button, it just continues moving because momentum is an actual factor for this. And yeah, see. So those are the two main ways that you end up controlling an object. And actually, not the two main ways, these are the only two ways. So this, one second, this thing that you have over here, get access, it's used for your keyboard, right? Now, let's say you have an Android device or a mobile device that you're creating this for the game. You need a joystick, right? So, I mean, joystick, button, anything, primarily a joystick. Any FPS you may have, etc., they tend to have joysticks. So, the best way for a joystick is instead of creating one from scratch, because that's a nightmare, you should just go to the asset store and you could go to, just a minute. Okay, this is taking far too long. No, piss off. Okay, hold on. I could just show it to you on this. Or, this works. Oh, also, I'm sorry if the layout's a little confusing because I tend to have a slightly different one than the default one. Right, so as you can see, joystick pack, this is for free. So what you can do over here is you could just download and import it. Right, you could download and import it. I already have it as you can see over here, so I don't have to do it specially. So yeah, so once you do this, you end up getting most of the stuff required to have your controls established in an Android or a mobile game at least. So for that to continue, what you have to do is basically, okay, for any sort of UI element in Unity, you have to first go to UI, duh, and you have to select canvas. Now, event system is what allows for any sort of input to be registered. Like, oh yeah, excellent. As I was saying, horizontal axis, horizontal, and vertical axis, vertical, right? So what we already established over here. So this exists by default in Unity. That's why you don't have to hard code it every single time. So this exists. Now you have canvas, right? So inside the canvas itself, what you could do is you end up having, right? So inside joystick pack, the available prefabs that exist are these following four. Let's just say you pick dynamic, for example. Doesn't matter. Okay, so you can see it over here. Now, okay, some of you might wonder what a prefab is. A prefab is basically a collection of a bunch of assets that you end up saving as a, let's say, package. Not exactly a package, but yeah, kind of like a package. So let's say, okay, now that I have this canvas with a dynamic joystick inside it, let's say I want to copy paste this in several instances, right? So maybe I can just drag and drop this. There you go. That's a prefab now. So as you can see, open prefab. So usually if you have items that will be used repeatedly, like let's say a bullet, So you end up creating a bullet, you add any particle effects, etc., etc., and you just package it all into one thing, and then you just dump it and drag it down into your assets. It becomes a prefab. So continuing with that, you have a dynamic joystick over here. So most of the stuff is here itself by default. This doesn't particularly matter, but I mean, yeah, sure. You could edit these things. Dead zone. Dead zone is basically from the very center of this point over here. At what radius is the movement of the joystick itself unresponsive? Like, let's say you end up having zero 0.5 or something. For half the radius of this external circle, if you move the joystick, it won't register that as an input. This is beneficial in certain games where you don't want very slight movements, but rather bigger movements only, right? And handle range just gives you the extent to which this handle ends up going against this external periphery. So now using this external part, what we can do is we end up manipulating this, right? So I'll just continue inside physics movement itself. And right, so we have our rigid body here. Most of the stuff is here already. So what we do is we do, okay, let's call it a move vector. Yeah, sure. Let's do, okay, no, wait. So let's do this. So move direction equals vector 3 dot right times joystick dot horizontal plus dot forward vertical. Okay, uh, give me a second, I'll just explain this. I kind of forgot how a reference move joystick, my bad. Right. Okay, so I refer to it this way. So here we have move joystick. Cool. So continuing with that. So right. So here we have move direction, again the same direction thing component. Now instead of having it done this way, where you end up getting these individual components using your horizontal with a get axis, horizontal and vertical with a get axis, what you do is you do vector 3 dot right. This stands for the positive x direction, right? So it's basically your horizontal movement. So it just gives it an axis of sorts. And then move joystick dot horizontal, for all intents and purposes, it serves the same function as input dot get axis horizontal. So it does that plus this to give you a resultant vector, which will be your move direction. So this is the horizontal and this is going to be a vertical. This is your resultant that you end up getting out of it. And out of that, you basically just do this. You do r dot blah blah blah. Yeah, and this should be functional. Should. Oh, it's already 40 minutes. All right, cool. So yeah, so again, here you end up having a socket, right? Every time you end up referring to a particular class like this, not a class, a type like this, if it isn't self-reference, then it'll leave a blank spot over there initially, which you can then drag and drop into so that it knows exactly what it's referring to. So here I ended up dumping a dynamic joystick in this. So that we play. So here, where did that go? That should not have disappeared. Why did that disappear? Oh yeah, it's a dynamic joystick. My bad. Yeah, so it has a few types, right? So yeah, okay, cool. See, as you can see, I do not like dynamic joystick. I don't know why I chose that. Okay, let's try floating joystick. Might be a little better. Go away. Okay. Yeah, this is better. Okay, yeah. So as you can see, as I try to drag it along, it ended up saying a null reference exception. It basically means that that reference that you end up dragging it along and it's supposed to command something, it doesn't exist yet, because in the process of deleting that previous dynamic joystick, it ended up removing it from here itself. So it doesn't know what command has to be received from where. So I drag and drop again, and hopefully this time it doesn't give me that error. And it doesn't move either for some reason. Okay, so you can see the move direction seems to be working fine, but my cube doesn't want to move. Okie doke. Uh, hmm. We could always try and just increase the speed. It's probably a bad idea, but yeah, let's try it. Oh, yeah, I guess not. So, as you can see, basic joystick controls. Now, one thing to keep in mind, joystick controls look really nice in your Unity editor itself, and this entire thing is your editor, right? But it's kind of shitty in your actual phone, so you have to play test it repeatedly on your Android device, like on your mobile device, whatever you're creating it on, because several times, oh shit, okay, I think it's gone. Right, okay, because several times what happens is there's a clipping issue, there's kind of a sticking issue, let's say. Okay, just 1 second. Yeah. So for example, in your actual game itself, every time you end up doing this, it just snaps by default to the extreme end. So I mean, these are a few issues that can be worked upon, and my cube fell off again. So yeah, my point being, you have to playtest it repeatedly. So you have to go to your build settings, and oh yeah, this is quite important. I kind of forgot. My bad. So by default, it exists in your PC, Mac, and Linux standalone build version. So the first thing that you should do is, before starting off Android development, is doing this and then clicking switch platform. What it does is it basically converts most of your assets into something that is recognizable by Android as a platform by itself. And yeah, and that's step one that you should follow, but clearly I didn't do it the right way. So yeah, that's primarily it. So that's that, yeah. I mean, I could probably tell you about buttons and stuff, but I'm not too sure. I'll just hold on 1 sec. Peace. So you guys have any doubts, you could just like clear it out on the live chat. Holy shit, that's a lot of doubts. Okay. Oh, sorry for the sound echoing, my bad. Oh, right. So that reminds me. Yeah, okay, you can continue asking doubts. I'm sorry if I'm going a little fast. My apologies. Didn't exactly go back and forth. Right. So, where is that supposed to be? Assets, import package. Nope, that's definitely not right. I'm not particularly sure what I'm looking for. Okay, shit. Okay, one sec. Ah, peace. Thanks. Yeah, so that's another thing. If you don't use Unity very often, you're gonna forget stuff. So yeah, this is not everything. It needs. There's supposed to be more. Okay. Hmm, that's odd. Well, okay. So worst case scenario, since it doesn't exist in package manager, I could just go here. Right. So there's okay. Unity by itself, standard assets. Unity by itself offers a lot of things, including their own standard assets, right? So this has a bunch of things, let's say. I hope this is a small file because I can't really download a massive one. And it's massive, excellent. Shit. Uh, okay. Oh wait, import. Okay, yeah, yeah, cool, cool. I have it downloaded somewhere. Peace. Right. So, yeah. So this asset basically what Unity has is provides several things. It has a few models pre-made. It has a few materials. It has physics-based materials. It has a few shaders. It has scripts. It's all kinds of things. It basically provides a very simplistic template for you to build your game upon, right? It's using it can't be considered a shortcut as you may think. Oh yeah, okay, see, so it gives you audio mixers, it gives you materials, it gives you a bunch of prefabs for UI, sprites, models, as I said, a lot of them, several prefabs, a few scenes, etc., etc. There's all kinds of things here. So as that imports, yeah, so as I was saying, so this basically gives you a very nice little starting point for your game which you can build upon eventually, right? So just use that as a template and build upon it. This can't be, you can't consider it copy pasting because, like, I mean, you can't. It's a pretty bad idea. You can just build upon it, right? I mean, most of these games aren't exactly built from scratch most of the time. They're just built upon older assets that they have. Also, one of the reasons why most games fail. But yeah. So, anyways, I thought I'll just show you guys some of the basic controls that exist on that, right? It has a few for third person controllers, etc., etc. And this is taking longer than I thought. I guess I shouldn't have imported everything. Anyways. Alright, so any other doubts? Eesh, looks like it's going to take forever. Okay, I didn't expect it to take this long. Am I right? Right, it has fonts as well. Oh, okay, we're done. And it threw a few errors. Okay, okay, it went away. Right, so standard assets. Where'd the FPS one go? No, character. Yeah, there you go. First person. Prefab FPS config. We've done that here. Okay. So this is one of the most basic ways of controlling a character that you can have. You have your FPS controller. So I mean, this is a pre-existent prefab in this. So again, yeah. So if you have a prefab and you want to edit it, you just click it there and edit. This can be explained in the future classes, but as you play this, right? So I don't know if you guys can hear that, but like it has footsteps. It has, you can see that bobble in the head kind of thing. I move my mouse around, he just looks around. I can run faster. Press shift, you can jump also. Yeah, so there's a lot of things. Also, it is probably a bad idea to have two main cameras, considering your FPS controller already does have one right there. So yeah, that's your first person controller. Yeah, get rid of that. You have your third person controller here. You have this guy. Right. Okay, just add a camera, might as well dump it there. So this is just a brief show of like what Unity has available, right? Nothing else. So this is yeah, that's your third person character. The animation and stuff can be done onto a model itself. We'll be teaching that in the later classes. This is a model that comes with the, yeah, okay, great, I know. This has all the animation and stuff already done on it. So you can see it's pretty good, well detailed and stuff. And that clipped away, nice. Okay, yeah, that's odd. So yeah, that's the third person controller. I already showed you the first person one. And point being, you can just like fiddle around with the standard assets. It has a lot of good things. There's stuff for 2D also, but I would personally not suggest 2D a lot because it's slightly different realm. So if you're going to stick to one, it's easy to stick to one usually. Effects and stuff, you have textures, you may have a few materials here as well. I don't know about that. Yeah, you have a few materials. You have all kinds of things. You have just standard models itself. There's a box. You can just drag and drop anything over here. Crazy. Yeah, it's pretty chill. You can do all kinds of things here. So yeah, point being, you could just fiddle around with this and play around with it till you get a hang of it, basically. Yeah. So that. So any more questions, or we'll just wrap it up, I guess. All right, since you guys seem to be pretty well versed with this stuff, I'll close now. If you have any other doubts regarding anything that I've mentioned or anything Rasogi taught the previous week too, just ask a question on the thing itself. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool. So yeah, if you have any doubts, just put it on the WhatsApp group. We'll always be there to respond and help out. So yeah, well, that was nice to tell you stuff, I guess, and hopefully